I'm Matt Bouchard with NAREITsREIT.com here in Miami for the 2016 NAREIT Leader in the Light Working Forum. Joining me is Chris Pyke, Chief Operating Officer of GRESB. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, let's talk about the most recent GRESB survey. What did you find as sort of the most surprising results that came out of that?
I have to say that one of the things that I am both impressed by and surprised by is this continued what I think of as up and to the right. The entire industry on a global basis is in motion. They are doing more, they are achieving higher levels, and that is broad-based and sustained. So we're impressed by greater levels of participation, but the fundamental message is that the market is moving toward higher levels of performance and that companies and funds are working to keep up.
And when we first began looking at the survey, the U.S. REITs lagged behind their peers in other countries. How have they gone about closing that gap, and is it as pronounced as it used to be?
First, I don't think it's as pronounced as it used to be, and I think that there's a couple of things that play into that look in the data. One is that the U.S. holdings are quite diverse, and one of the things, the leading countries such as Australia and actually Canada, which we broke out for the first time this year, they are smaller, a little more homogeneous. So if in this year's standings, the U.S. and Europe, with kind of broad, diverse real estate portfolios, score essentially together. That doesn't negate the question of what are our colleagues in Australia and Canada and so forth doing that we could learn from. And we actually had a session at the U.S. Green Building Council's Green Build session back in November talking about just this point. We had our friends from Australia come and talk to us about what are they doing. And they talked about a competitive, close-knit real estate community that was very motivated to create high-quality product and a combination of both regulatory and investor pressure. And I think that those leading markets, Australia and Canada, for instance, are a microcosm of the pressures that are forcing the larger European and U.S. markets upwards.
And lastly, what impact do you think universally agreed upon reporting standards in this area would have on the investment market and how institutions are able to value all the work that companies are doing in sustainability?
For me, this is an issue of informed, engaged, and responsible investment. We want investors to know their investment, and we believe that environmental, social, and governance dimensions are relevant to their decision-making process. And we also believe that there is room for differentiation, that leading companies are doing something different than mid-pack and doing something different than just starting. And so our fundamental issue is to bring investors that transparency so that they can factor it into their decisions, their risk-adjusted returns, their asset allocation mix, that they can exploit those differences in their investment strategy. So for us, this process starts, and to some degree it ends, with that every investor should ask for this information every time. And every company should be prepared to supply it. We think that that is a reasonable endpoint. For instance, in the European market, the last thing I'll say about it is that 78, 79% of the listed space is participating. In the US, we're now over 50%. We're 60% in Australia. So by now, the normal average response is, yes, I can provide that information.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you very much.
For more on this and other REIT news and analysis, be sure to visit REIT.com.